What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs Live podcast. I'm Kyle Malzhan alongside co-host Mark Talarico, and the offseason is officially here. And I know the season didn't go the way we wanted to as the Cubs fell one game short for the NL Central title, and then they went on to lose to the wild card game against the Rockies. So I guess I want to start off asking you, Mark. I want to get straight into it. What went wrong for the Cubs this year? And it's crazy we're even saying this, right? Because this is a 95-win team that didn't win the division, and usually that's good enough. I know the power numbers were down. The Cubs had a lot of injuries they had to work through, and the brutal schedule down the stretch that we all have been talking about. But in your mind of view, what went wrong for the Cubs this year?
I mean, other than Javi Baez and the starting rotation did well, those that were at least healthy, obviously Chatwood didn't work out. Yu Darvish won one game. Brandon Morrow was injured for half the season. So the bullpen did pretty well given that, and so did the rotation. But outside of that, just about everything else went wrong. I mean, every player other than Javi Baez, and I mean, Rizzo had a Rizzo-like season, but overall, just everybody regressed. And obviously everybody, including myself, is talking about how Chili Davis is at least part of the problem. But it's concerning regardless, because I think that when you get a group of professionals together and they've been playing for so long, I don't think that a new hitting coach is going to have that much of an impact on everybody's game. That's how I feel about that. So I think that Chili Davis is definitely part of the problem, and he's part of the reason why things went south, but I don't think he is 100% to blame. But I would start with him, if we're being honest.
Right. And, the Cubs had to go through injuries with Yu Darvish, who was shut down, Brandon Morrow, and then the next closer was Pedro Strop, who also got injured in maybe the most important time in the Cubs time frame. And the bullpen the last few weeks, you couldn't rely on them. It was all about the starting pitching that was the subject. And, you had Cishek, who was run down by September because that was Madden's go-to guy in the beginning. And then you had Chris Bryant getting injured. He missed 60 games, and we'll get into Chris Bryant later with all the talks that have came out today about him. But I mean, you have these superstar type players that were supposed to be big pieces in your, everyday lineup and such, and yet, they didn't get it done. So Chili Davis, for me, he has to go. He didn't, like you said, the players progressed, they pressed. Other than Javier Baez, and here's a stat I'm just going to pull up about Chili Davis, right? Cubs hitting coach, he was with the Red Sox last year. Boston hit 51 less homers than the AL average last season, right? They fired Davis, Cubs pick him up. This year, the Red Sox, granted they did get JD Martinez, I know, but they're hitting 15 more homers than the AL average, and the Cubs have hit 12 less homers than the league average this year and 56 less homers than last year. Which that's a big number. And yes, we know that Chris Bryant went out, but he doesn't make up for the 56 homers. There was Wilson Contreras that really, didn't have the season that anybody really wanted him to. So Chili Davis for me is a big one, and change is never bad, especially when you're looking at coaches and such like that. So, I mean, there was a number of things that went wrong for the Cubs. Another one of them, getting cold at the wrong time. The Brewers just were a very hot team. And what can you say, really? I mean, they did their duty to take the NL Central. So, I mean, as we head in the offseason, do you expect the Cubs to move some of these young pieces? If so, who? Because I know for me, I think it's going to be Almora or it's going to be Ian Happ on the move. So if you want to just talk about that a little bit, who would be one guy that you could see the Cubs moving?
Well, I do think that somebody is going to be moved, and I hate to see it because over the last 4 or so years, ever since they've been in the minors and making their way up, us as Cubs fans, we've been just enamored with these guys. We've been talking about, I can't wait to see how Ian Happ's going to be. Albert Almora, he's been in the organization forever. Like all of these guys, and they're here and they're having some success, but they're not having the success that the Cubs need them to have. So naturally, a change is needed. And Theo's even gone on the record saying that expect changes to happen. I still believe in Kyle Schwarber. He didn't have that bad of a year, really. His power numbers weren't great, but he was taking a lot of walks. He was hot and cold. He wasn't really the explosive player that we hoped he would be after the 2015 season. But I think we shouldn't give up on Kyle Schwarber. I think that if anybody's going to go, I think it'll be Ian Happ. I do think it'll be Ian Happ, and I think that the emergence of David Bodie, in a way, I mean, Bodie did cool off, but I think that he's such a defensive stud, and that he's shown the clutch gene, he's shown the ability to step into a role immediately when nobody's expecting him to, that I think that Ian Happ's going to be the odd man out. And I felt like he's been the odd man out all along.
Yeah, and I did too. And Ian Happ is a guy who can kind of give you the most value about a player. You know, he's a switch hitter. He can play the infield. He can play the outfield. So he really gives you that most value when you're looking for a trade. So Addison Russell, as many of you guys know by now, that Addison Russell was suspended 40 games for breaking the MLB's domestic abuse policy. And it's hard to believe for me he will even play another game for the Cubs, right? I mean, do you think the Cubs designate him for assignment, or do you think the Cubs at least try to get something out of him? And obviously, it's hard to imagine now that it's even going to be worth much. But what do you think the Cubs and Addison Russell's relationship is moving forward?
I think the relationship is done. I don't think he's going to play for the Cubs. I don't think they're just going to release him straight up. I think that they're going to try to work out a deal, because in the past we've seen different players that have had domestic violence abuse and then they've served their suspension and then they were traded. I mean, look at Aroldis Chapman. He's a great example of this. And I think that the Cubs, they're fed up with it. I know that fans were already unhappy with the fact that with the whole Aroldis Chapman thing in 2016, they were upset with Daniel Murphy because of his homophobic slurs going on. Like, I think that, you know, Theo and Jed, they're not dumb. I think that they are looking and they're seeing, we don't want to piss off any more fans. And morally, obviously, like, yeah, a suspension's nice, but you can't really replace what went on with Melissa Russell. You know, that is still terrible. If, you know, once again, we don't know exactly what happened, but it definitely sounds like there was something. So I think that it's time for that relationship to be done, which it sucks. I got an Addison Russell jersey 3 years ago. I loved the guy. I thought that he was going to be like our starting shortstop for the foreseeable future. But, you know, it's sometimes more than sports. And really, when you look at the big picture, I think that he's got to go.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with you 100%. And for me, when I was thinking about Addison Russell, you know, when he got traded from the Oakland Athletics to the Cubs, I started to read up on him. I started to watch some highlights of him, and I thought he was a stud. And obviously, we've seen that defensively, but offensively, other than 2016 where he hit in 97 or 92 runs, he wasn't anything special other than a defensive plus defender for the Cubs. And, you know, like you said, it sucks because there was so much potential, but it was bigger than baseball sometimes. And this is one of the cases where I think it's best just to let him go. And maybe you get something out of him, and even nothing. The best part about this Cubs team is they have options, right? So if Russell were to go, Javier Baez filled that role better than Addison Russell fulfilled that shortstop role. So, and on the plate too. So, I mean, it's not going to be a big blow. But obviously he was that plus defender, but he never gave anything on the plate. But yeah, man, it's just one of those tough situations where I don't know what the Cubs are going to do, but I hope they make the right decision that a lot of fans want them to. Now we're in the offseason, and there's been a lot of talk about what it can entail, right? The two biggest free agent pieces are on the market. That's Manny Machado and Bryce Harper, and both of them have been linked to the Cubs by the media. Which one do you think really lands up being a Cub? For me personally, I want Bryce Harper. I don't care about what he did this past season. I don't care about his power numbers. If you can get that name in your lineup where he's protected front and back, 100% you go get him. But realistically, the more I'm thinking about this now, I think Machado makes a lot more sense for the Cubs with Addison Russell somewhat out of the question and a very, you know, deep outfield we have. And if the Cubs were to go get, you know, Bryce Harper, one of those pieces in the outfield are going to move, whether it's Almora or Ian Happ. One of them are going to got to go, or even Kyle Schwarber. But I don't see Theo trading Kyle Schwarber. I do not want to believe it until I see it. But I do think it's going to be Almora, Ian Happ traded if the Cubs were to go get, you know, Bryce Harper. But the more I think about this realistically, I think Machado's the better suit for the team, as in position-wise. But we know the Cubs, all these guys can play different positions. So for you, who do you want in a Cubs uniform in 2019?
Well,
Or who do you think is the better fit?
You were talking about better fits. You were saying how if the Cubs were to get Bryce Harper, then they would make a deal and they would trade someone out. And we're already assuming that Addison Russell isn't going to be a Cub, so we're just assuming that the shortstop spot is open or something like that. The thing is that I don't think it makes a difference when it comes to that, because regardless if the Cubs were holding on to Addison Russell and they decided to get Manny Machado, they would trade someone out. And then if they decided to get Bryce Harper, they would trade someone out of the outfield. It doesn't matter in that case. It makes more sense because there is technically that hole. But I think that at the end of the day, it's going to be whoever Theo wants. And I think that realistically, the Cubs already have a pretty stacked infield. If you think about Rizzo at first, you could put, second base is kind of up for grabs because it could be Ian Happ, it could be Ben Zobrist. They have him for one more year. And then Javi at shortstop, Bryant or Bodie at third.
Well,
and
Bodie
then
could play base as well too. So that's a great player to have.
And then like the outfield though, I think that Bryce Harper makes more sense. I just think he makes more sense there, and it would make dealing somebody like Almora or Happ or even Schwarber, which, like you said, I also don't want to see him go. Love Schwarber with all my heart. But I think it would make more sense, and Harper's been that guy for years. He's been the guy that every Cubs fan has been talking about, that's my right fielder, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. What are they going to do with Jason Hayward? I have no clue. I have no clue how that's going to work out. I have no clue how they're going to afford it. But at the end of the day, if Theo wants his guy, he's going to go after him. And I think his guy is going to be Bryce Harper.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. Like you said, I don't know where Theo stands on this. I don't have Theo's mindset. I don't know what he's thinking, but I think he's going to do something. And the Cubs have money, right? They were under tax threshold last year, which kind of sets them up for a pretty big offseason this year as well. So the Cubs have money, and I expect them to go out and get somebody. Mm-hmm. Now, when you talked about Jason Hayward, obviously we know Jason Hayward's big, contract and, his opt-outs. He's not going to opt out. He would be stupid to opt out. He's making the money. He's going to stay with the Cubs. In my opinion, what's going to happen if Theo goes out and gets Harper is you're going to see, an outfield with Bryce Harper in right field, Hayward in center field, and then left field you can have either Brian or Schwarber. So really, I expect, and I after this season, I really like Hayward in the outfield. I really like Hayward. 2016 and 17, I was kind of up in the air with it, but I really like Hayward in the lineup and his presence, and he showed some life this season. We knew what he could do defensively, and offensively he showed us some life. So if the Cubs were to go out to get Bryce Harper, it'd be Bryce Harper in right field, Hayward in center, and then, Kyle Schwarber, Chris Bryant, Ben Zobrist, and then even Madden said that they were going to give David Bodie some reps in the outfield as well. So the Cubs have options, and that's the best thing about this team is they don't train one player to play their position other than, you got your Rizzo, you got Wilson Contreras. But if you're an infielder and an outfielder, they expect you to almost play two different roles, and that's awesome. And I think a lot of teams are going to transition to that moving forward in the MLB. So it's going to be interesting for sure. We'll see if the Cubs and Theo go out and get Harper, Machado. You can also trade, Addison Russell. You can dump him off. Then you got Cole Hamels. Do we resign Cole Hamels for his option? There's so much yet to be sorted out. And it's going to be a great offseason. And I know a lot of fans still want to be in the postseason, but that's not the reality right now. So let's focus on the offseason and see what can happen. All right. So today there were reports by David Kaplan on the ESPN radio of Chris Bryant turning down a $200+ million contract extension with the Cubs. But honestly, are we surprised? Because as a player, why wouldn't you bet on yourself? I saw your tweet. You bet on yourself as a player. He's going to get paid in arbitration money the next several years. And look, his agent is Scott Boras, someone who likes to get the most out of his players. And I've seen a lot of talk, but I think the media is making a little too much out of this. Mark, where do you stand on this?
Honestly, I saw that and I thought, good. I don't want him to be settled and to say, awesome, give me the money, because then we've seen that before historically with athletes that they take the money and then they're already, I've already made this much money, like I'm good to go. And I don't think Chris Bryant is that kind of guy. And he already has so many different endorsements with Express and Red Bull and different kind of things that the money isn't really the issue with him. But he truly is betting on himself. To turn down $200 million, we don't know the specifics, but they said 200 plus. My guess it was somewhere around an 8-year extension, 225, somewhere around there, which is just stupid money. But that's him looking at himself and saying, look, I'm going to be in the Cubs through 2021, something like that. and I have this many years to truly prove myself. And at the end of the day, if he is thinking that he's worth more than that money, that whether we extend him or not, which I hope the Cubs do, if he's able to be worth more than that over these next 3 to 4 years, then it's going to be worth it at the end.
Absolutely. And like you said, I mean, Kris Bryant is that guy for the Cubs that you want to get extended. Obviously, I bet if I were to bet, I think Theo wants it done earlier than later, just to have kind of that certainty as a, as an organization standpoint, and where do you send your money, this and that. But the reality is Kris Bryant's going to get better. And he's the type of guy, like Theo said in his press conference, is he has the mentality that he's going to put in the work day in and day out, and he's going to get better, and he's never going to settle. So if Kris Bryant's betting on himself, you better believe that he's going to have a great season next year, a better season than the year after that, and years to come. So I think we haven't seen the best of Kris Bryant yet. And obviously, after a disappointing 2018, he's going to take that into the offseason. And, I watched his post-game interview after the wild card loss, and he was almost in tears, saying that's not where he wanted to have the season he did. As the team, they are pretty disappointed. All those players in that locker room know what it feels like to be that one game short. So they're going to take that mentality and bring it off to next year. And I'm excited for next year already, and we're only a week into the offseason. So much to be sorted out, so much to talk about. And as I wrap things up here, the NL and ALCS are set. Dodgers versus Brewers, Astros versus Red Sox. Who are you rooting for in the playoffs, and what do you think will be the World Series matchup? For me, I'm not too sure about the NL. It could go either way. Do the underdogs, as you want to call them, the underdogs in the Brewers, because they kind of been undermined by the media all year, are they going to keep that 11-game win streak going and that hot streak going and beat the postseason experienced Dodgers, who have been in the NLCS 3 years now? And then you got the Astros and Red Sox. Obviously, the Astros want to get back-to-back. And the Red Sox, well, they're just such a good team this season that it's hard to bet against them. If I had to pick, I'm going to pick the Brewers and the Red Sox in the World Series. Brewers are a very good team right now. They're hot. But I also can see the Dodgers, pulling that one out. The Brewers haven't really had too much adversity as of late, right? I mean, they just keep on rolling. Their bullpen gets it done. Their starting rotation obviously hasn't blown up in their face, which is frustrating because you always thought that their starting rotation was not going to do well, but they keep excelling. So I don't know, man. It could go both ways. It could go Dodgers, Red Sox, or Brewers, Red Sox. I think the Red Sox are going to be in the World Series, whether they're playing the Dodgers or Brewers, who knows? But for you, Mark, who do you think is going to be in the World Series, and who are you rooting for?
I think that the Brewers are the 2015 Chicago Cubs, where they've been on a run. They finished the season unbelievably hot. I mean, I can't believe how many games they've won. It's unbelievable. I can't even hate on it. It's truly impressive what they've done. I'm amazed. But I think that the experience from the Dodgers, and they're still upset from last year, I don't think there's any way that the Dodgers are going to lose in the NLCS. I don't see it happening. They want revenge. I think they're going to make it to the World Series, but I think they're going to lose to the Red Sox. I think that the Red Sox are they're unbelievable. Where's their weakness? What weakness do they have? Their bullpen, maybe? I don't even know, but they're so good. I just don't think that any team can stop them. I mean, the Astros, they looked unbeatable against Cleveland, but at the same time, well, I think it's going to be a great series. I think the Red Sox will beat the Astros, and then I think the Red Sox will beat the Dodgers in the World Series.
It's going to be a really fun postseason as the AL and NLCS kind of wrap up into the World Series. And like we said before, the Cubs aren't in it, which is a shock because the past 3 years, the Cubs were in it. So it's a little step back. And for me personally, you kind of have that time where you grieve and you're like, man, the Cubs could have been there. The Cubs should have did this. If they would have won just one more game in the regular season, they would have been all different. But the reality is they're not. And now you kind of can just sit back and kind of just breathe a little bit, enjoy some good postseason baseball. And that's the best part right now, is where you can enjoy these games and really not worry and, frustrate yourself and whatnot. But all right, I think that just about does it, Mark. We covered a lot of topics, a lot of things yet to talk about as the offseason rolls on. As we said, that the Cubs could pull off another extension with Cole Hamels. They could get Bryce Harper. They could get Manny Machado. There's a lot to talk about yet and a lot to come. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Cubs Live podcast. I'm Kyle. He's Mark, and go Cubs.